Hey there, everyone. I'm Carson Grubaugh, and
Sean Robinson, how you doing?
this is Living the Line. Today, we're going to be talking about the Jim Lee X-Men Artist Edition. I wanted to bring this book to Sean and talk about it for two reasons. The first reason is this is the book X-Men #1 that really got me into comics. I was already buying comics because of the Ninja Turtles. The Ninja Turtles cartoon came out. Not the Eastman and Laird stuff, but the Archie comics. I didn't have a TV, but as a 7-year-old kid who loved the Ninja Turtles, I the only way I could get them, like the TV show, was through those old Archie comics. So we would go get those. We were in Sacramento, um, and I knew there was a new one out. I don't know how I knew that because they're at the newsstand, but I pestered my parents. We were at my grandma's house in Sacramento, and I pestered them to go to a comic book store. And I went and got the new Ninja Turtles. And my brother didn't even care. He just knew that because I was getting something, he had to get something. And we went home and I read my Ninja Turtles, and then I walk over and see Trevor on my grandma's big guest bed. And I was like, "What are you reading, man?" And this is the book that he had just picked up, like, just screw it, Carson gets one. And obviously, like, as I don't know how old I was when this came out. This is 90. I was 10. Is that when this came out? 91?
Yeah, 91.
91. Yeah, yeah. So as a, well, newly minted, maybe 10-year-old, this was probably the coolest thing that you could ever see. So this at 10 years old set me. I mean, I was already convinced from the Ninja Turtles that I wanted to be an artist, but this made me want to be a comic artist. So when the Jim Lee um, artist edition came out, it's like, well, yeah, I have to have that, just because that's the thing that kicked it off.
Well,
um,
not to derail your anecdote with my anecdote, but I'm a year and a half, I think, older than you, and I read all the Archie Ninja Turtles as well. I had all the Eastman and Laird ones too, but the I think that the Archie ones was probably my first comic subscription. I remember
Oh
I
wow.
remember the Ken McCroney, was that the name of the artist who did the first 24 issues or so?
It wasn't until this, like, I would just go buy those. I didn't know anything about artists or anything. It was just Ninja Turtles, right? I care about characters. When I bought this, I knew there was the guy named Jim Lee, and I knew he was like everything, and I was going to draw like him. So I have no idea what the artist's name was, but this is where I started paying attention to artists, and since then I've never cared about characters. We were talking about this, like, who took over after this. I think it was one of the Kuberts,
Right.
and within 2 issues I was like, that's not Jim Lee. It's a bad approximation. Jim Lee's doing Wildcats. Like, I don't need to read this X-Men garbage anymore. And so from that point on, I definitely followed creators. Yeah. So
So
I'm glad you're getting those as well. Those are important. My parents would have never let me have the Eastman and Laird ones. So
I got the first edition, the colorized ones, and so the I think that the covers were slightly less scary, um, so they snuck in under the radar.
yeah, I would have been too scared. Those would have been like hiding somewhere. Um, so the other thing is that when I got this big old beautiful book here, this is by IDW, big hardcover. I noticed flipping through it that, to my eyes, some of the pages looked pretty good. They looked like original art, and to my eyes, some of the pages look really soft, and especially for how sharp I know Scott Williams inks were, especially at that time, you can just tell. And I've seen, some of the original pages of this kind of inking here and there at cons. The pages looked fuzzy to me, and I was really disappointed that for a book that I think this was $125, $150 book, I was kind of disappointed that I was paying to see, like, basically original art, and it still felt like bad fuzzy reproduction. Some of it's beautiful, like the cover's really beautiful, but some of the reproductions aren't so great. And then Sean, has the expertise to explain what, like, the problem with this is you want to preserve, like you can see on the cover, because the art is old now, the board has yellowed. You can see where they had cut out like the X-Men logo and put that onto the board afterwards. So you want a color reproduction, right? Where you can get all of that evidence of how the art was made. And then you're dealing with a different print process, right, Sean?
Yeah. Yeah, so when you're reproducing something in color, a completely different, entirely different process than when you're actually reproducing something in black and white as line art. It's not half-toned. You're using multiple printer plates instead of just the one plate, the black plate. And it seems to me that a lot of the interest in the original artwork also comes down to kind of, you know, fetishization maybe of process. People like to see the blue lines. They like to see the schmutz. They like to see up close, and you sort of get a little bit more of an artist's eye view. What was this looking like when it was sitting down on the drawing board? I suppose.
Yeah,
That's a
and you
big
can
old close up there, huh?
yeah, you can see that here because it's a big. This is an extra big close up, and you can still see where they ruled off the lettering with the lettering guides, the old school lettering guides for hand lettering. There's some blue in there where like the original bubble would have been. You can see there's some white out where Scott Williams inking it probably didn't like the line he made, so he whited out and redid it. Also, some white out where you can see he wanted a continuous hatching across there. You don't want to draw to here and stop and draw to there, so you draw and then white out the little luster points that are all over here because everything's so shiny in this art. But yeah, that's what you want in these reproductions. That's what we're looking at, and I think it's because people like us who are artists feel like there's something to be learned, right? Learned from looking at how they did it. That's something we cared a lot about on Strange Stuff of Alex Raymond. I would have paid all kinds of money for a book like this of prints of Alex Raymond art to try and suss out how he did it.
Where does this book start chronologically?
Let's see. This is X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 248. So I don't know. I wasn't buying this when Jim Lee started it. I started with X-Men #1, so I don't have memories.
This first issue, yeah. And is that inked by Terry Austin then, this first one, or is that Scott Williams?
No, Dan Green.
Dan Green. Okay. Yeah. So Dan Green had worked on X-Men for years and years and years before Jim Lee came aboard. He was Mark Silvestri's inker, especially when they were doing 2 issues a month. Dan Green really holding up the fort. Fantastic inker, really striking stuff, and really more of a finisher on Silvestri's stuff. You'll notice, I mean, it's his stuff is wildly different, inked by Green than it is inked by him or his later work. Really distinctive stuff.
Yeah, but it seems a little more standard to me. And one thing I thought was really interesting is the introduction to this is by Scott Williams, and he talks about him and Jim Lee and the other guys in the studio that they had, the homage studio that they had, like Whilce Portacio and some of the other guys. They were going back and forth with these mark making techniques, and you see that evolve through the book. It's something I'm curious about because I think the mark making techniques, they're so distinctive, but they're really weird too. Like, why would you make those choices? And so I was curious looking through the book, like what was it that they were talking about in the studio? Like here, this seems like pretty standard inking to me. I mean, you get the feathering and whatnot, but it's not that weird, like triple lines connected in pyramids kind of Scott Williams thing. So I'm curious what problem they were trying to solve that you see evolving through these books. I was talking to my partner Tori about it because she's looking at this like, babe, you spent $150 on it, like go be a nerd, whatever. But she's looking at it like this art is ridiculous, and I was showing her that stuff, and she's like, I don't get it. And so we were talking about it, and I said, the only thing I can think that they were doing, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, when we're re-inking one of these pieces. Yeah, like these pages here are Whilce Portacio. I don't know why these are in here. These are obviously pages by Wills Portasio, like the style changes. But he's got more of the. It looks like he's the guy that first comes up with these little connected triangles and stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I always called it the ticky tack. Um, I don't know. It's interesting how quickly it was adopted among the other people that would eventually be image people. Um, but the ticky tack. It's like everything is a speed line. Uh,
Yeah, that's what. So that's part of it. I think. Like the problem had to have been like, how do we make everything as exciting as
right.
possible, but also like, so this is where it really starts to look like Jim Lee to me. And this is Scott Williams inking now. So obviously some of that comes with Scott. It's the Scott Williams solution.
Right.
Um, I think the other thing is it's all supposed to look aggressive, so like everything just looks like blades. It's like
Right.
let's make an image out of blades. Like all the hatching has to look like blades or something. I don't know. I still don't understand, but I still like it. I mean, maybe it's
Yeah.
just nostalgia, but I still love the way it looks. I think it looks so solid.
Well,
I tagged this page. I thought this was so interesting. They used a linear hatching zipatone on here, so it's all
right.
vertical marks. I thought it was very bizarre. They did it on the cover too. On the cover, it's all vertical, and that works with the pose. Here, I was actually like, what in the hell are you thinking? Why wouldn't you turn the zipatone? If you're going for action, why do you have all these vertical lines? It makes the shield feel so just
Yeah.
heavy downwards. Like, why wouldn't you turn that zipatone at the angle that Cap is moving at and
Right.
let the lines of the tone be kind of a zip tone? So with that comment about like everything trying to be constructed out of like knives or speed lines, I thought it was funny that they every time they have Captain America's shield, it's perfectly vertical
Hmm.
zip tone on there.
How much of the Scott Williams inking do you think is reliant on French curves or physical devices like that? Because when I'm looking at the shield, at least zoomed out like this, that to me looks like he's plunked an object down on there and done that manually with done it with a compass or
Yeah, this is a perfect circle for sure. I don't think much of it is. Most of it looks hand done.
I'd be curious
But
if you think of it that Wolverine claws and the example we're going to ink are
oh, like or
handwritten
the
too.
swords here.
Yep, exactly.
Those do look very mechanically perfect.
It looks like a French curve to me.
Yeah, that's possible. And these kind of lines, they look very
Hmm.
perfect. So I'm sure there's some of that. But I mean most of it's pretty organic. And here's another one that I tagged because again, Cap Shield with this perfectly vertical, which kind of works better on this one, but why not have it at like the angle of Captain America again? Um, and then this page I think is interesting. There's a few pages like this where you'll see this one is very white looking. I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but
Yeah.
the scan it's very much white and black. So to me, that's probably more how it looked like when it came off their artboard.
Right.
It's been like preserved better over time, or just the scan has been adjusted out, and then you have pages like this where it's obviously yellowed over time.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting. They're getting it from different collections, and so of course you're going to have different scanners and different approaches, and not just the different conditions of the paper itself. And on the Cerebus original art portfolios, we actually had the problem where people complained when it looked as white as the original art does, because Dave used uh, fairly cheap artboard at first, and that stuff has all gone crazy yellow. But basically, everything from Church and State onward, even though the artwork is more than close to 30 years old, looks bone white. And people complained when we did a portfolio that actually looked like the original artwork. They liked the schmutz, or at least the people who complained liked the schmutz. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a certain amount of bringing these, exaggerating these things a little bit, like the zipatone on the right hand side right there. I really doubt that it's that dark in person now. So the reason that tone is darkened over time is because the acetate, a zip tone like that is essentially just printed acetate. You've got like a sticker basically that's clear, a carrier with a little bit of film on the outside of it, and the part that's the adhesive on the back has a very high acid content, And so over time, it yellows or greens the paper that it's been adhered to.
And we'll look at a scan of Black Widow up close, because that was some. This page here is, I think, is the one I scanned. Yeah, they've got the yellowing down, but I think part of the reason it looks dark, and this is one of the pages where I thought this doesn't look like original art to me. The art, the and most of the stuff in the book, the lines don't look like an ink line. They're too fuzzy to my eye. And so I scan them, and then when we look at them up close in the scan, you can really see the difference between the cover, which has that sharp crispness of like an actual ink line, and something like this, where when you'll see when we get up into the zipatone, it's like, or some of these lines, it's really super blurry. Here's another example where this page, I think this is wide enough where you can even see it on camera. Like this has that old yellowed artboard look, and this one is crisp black and white, except for the word balloons are very yellowed. So I don't know if this is just a really well preserved piece of paper, but the glue that they used to do the word balloons, like if they did these on another paper and glued them.
Yeah, I mean all the standard paste up materials are just so high acid content. I've done paste up in my high school newspaper class right before digital era came in, and the standard operating procedure for all that stuff is you use rubber cement. Now, rubber cement will eat a hole through a piece of paper in a couple of years, And so that's what's going on with that particular thing. But yeah, you're right. The balance of the page is much more knocked out in terms of the content. I wouldn't be surprised if the original artwork is closer to that tone though than some of the yellow ones.
Yeah, especially because this is obviously color. I don't know if they adjusted this out and kept the color here or what. This one also has some red lines back here that they were doing a color drop with.
Right, so color indication for the colors.
Yeah. And they have the drop the red lines. But it's also weird that there's like these yellow ones and then like these more gray. So there's two different colors coming through, like they were glued on with different materials, maybe. Mm-hmm. Like this is rubber cement or something. Yeah, but it's really strange to see that, like these cutout lettering with the old Ames lettering guide. Like you can still see all the lines made with the lettering guide. So that's a lot of fun.
You said that the indication on the side there says knockout red.
Drop red lines.
Drop red line, yeah. So that's an indication to the photographer who is going to be working on shooting the negatives for the line art, and all the photographer would have had to do is put a color filter on the negative camera as they're taking it, and that filter is just enabling the camera to not see the red, and so the red would just photograph basically the same as the white areas would.
But then somebody would be using that to go back and color.
Right. Yeah, so the colorist themselves has either a photocopy, a photostat of the original artwork, or the original artwork itself in front of him, and can use that as a guide for whatever it is that they had in mind for that image.
So it may not even reproduce as lines. It could just be like blue here and
exactly
green there as two flat colors butting against each other.
You got it.
Interesting. Okay. So this was, I'm not going to open. This is actually, yeah, I'll open it. This is really nice. They have the full, like that's such a, I don't know. I mean, like I said, this was the first time I bought. I think I had bought some stuff like like that Smallville TV or Superboy TV show had a comic book. So I have bought a couple comics here and there other than the Turtles, but I don't know. This is why I bought the book, was for X-Men #1. It wasn't until, I mean, a lot of time we like to talk, me and Sean like to talk about storytelling formalisms and stuff. I don't think we're going to get a ton of that out of X-Men #1. But what I did notice while I was oohing and awing over being able to revisit this book, and then also while I was looking for something to scan for me and Sean to ink, I realized how smart they were, or just how damn good Jim Lee was at creating these iconic poses, these iconic images. that I don't know if it like stuck in my mind the first time I saw it, or if it's because I looked at this comic book hundreds of times, but I realized that like my ideas of all the X-Men characters are based on these iconic poses that he does in this book, and they do such a good job of flowing through the issue, like introducing them all. You know, like I don't care how silly of a style this actually is, I still think that's a badass drawing.
Yeah.
Like the lighting on that's great. There's this weird thing, I don't know if we'll be able to see it. It's one of the things I couldn't figure out. Maybe we can zoom in on it on another page when we're inking, but there's this weird little like stroke, and then like they put a box on the end of it. I don't know if we can see those
Are you
enough.
able to zoom in on your
We'll look
overhead?
at it when we look at the
Okay, great.
scans. It's a really indicative thing, that like a really specific thing that they do. That's one of those solutions. I was thinking, man, when Jim Lee and Scott Williams and Los Portasio, they're all sitting around in Amish Studios trying to figure out whatever the problem that they're trying to figure out, like what was that supposed to be solving? Because I can't figure it out from an artistic standpoint,
So,
what it would be doing.
so many of these things seem to be creating gradients. It's almost like a line art solution to the airbrushing phenomenon of the 80s.
Yeah,
And,
that could be.
and some of the poses, you know, are I get like a really heavy, like late Renaissance aspect to it, where you have a sort of stage. You know, they're all standing on the stage, and we're out in the audience, and you know, we're looking up at them from 15 feet below because they're out on the proscenium
Yeah.
or whatever. And the lighting, you know, you got like a multi-layered lighting. I mean, just looking at like the yeah, exactly, the muscular forms there. You have this idealized, you know, godlike form that's being lit from three different lighting sources simultaneously, and he's
Yeah, and the
posing
direction of
for
the
us.
marks reinforce that. It's like here's the volume this way, here's the volume this way, here's the volume that way. So I get all of that, but it's like one they we'll have to look at it up close. I mean, it is a value thing that they're doing, but it's just such a funny solution to it. Like there's some, yeah, I wish I could. Well, hopefully there's some of this stuff in the scans. It's just such peculiar solutions, I think. I don't know how they came to it, but it works. I still think it's cool, and it looks so solid. I mean, that's why these images are burned into my memory, because they're so three dimensional. Like the Wolverine I sent over to ink, to me is
Yeah.
still like one of the baddest, most three dimensional feeling
Well,
Wolverines. But
it's interesting. You get his contemporaries who picked up on this mark making really quickly, and you know, in the hands of somebody like, you know, like the Layfeld Danny Miki contingent, you can have it totally untethered from any drawing whatsoever, and it's like scattered. It's like broken glass shading. You
yeah,
know.
I mean McFarlane did that too, right? There's just like little, it's like hair marks all over the place or something. Um, he does less of that, but it's still there. Yeah, they just showed up everywhere. I mean, all throughout the '90s. Stephen Platt.
Right.
You get those guys. It's just like how many tiki marks can I put on it? But
Dale
from a
Keown.
story, sorry, say that again.
Dale Keown.
He was better at it though. Like he was better at this big stuff. I always thought he was one of the more sophisticated guys with this stuff because it's very volumetric. It wasn't just
Mhm.
random tiki marks. It was all cross contour stuff with him. But like, yeah, especially Danny Miki over like Greg Capullo,
Right.
really great stuff. I love that stuff, but it was just tick, 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 tick everywhere. Um, but yeah, like from the storytelling aspect, like here you go, boom, there's the X-Men, minus like the badasses. The badasses are a couple pages away in the sewer, but you get like the whole team all at once. And then you go and you get like, man, iconic, like Jean Grey is kind of the more of the sweetheart, right? Like she's just
The
standing
woman
there.
behind the man.
Yeah, a little more subdued. And then Rogue, like the playful badass, pulling up her sleeve, getting ready for the fight. Um,
Her hair's grown about a foot since the last artist
yeah,
drew her.
Iceman, he doesn't get as much play. Jim Lee didn't like him as much. But then Colossus, like this big chunk just flying at you. They're such perfect icons of each character. Archangel back here, I mean, he's a little smaller, but the wings are so sharp. And then you get the three that are hiding in the sewer, which are like the darker, grimier. So they kind of save them, and you just get that. I mean, again, iconic Wolverine, right? Just that like short chunk of a guy coming at you with the claws. And the introducing Psylocke and Gambit, but they get their own. And then you get, okay, now we get the Psylocke with the badass ninja pose. And obviously they know Wolverine gets, there's so many, like, I've never liked Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. He's too tall and pretty because I grew up with like Jim Lee's short, chunky, grumpy old Canadian man.
Yeah.
There's another picture later that's like
perfect. Irritated that he has to be polite to everybody.
Yeah, like
he's the perfect old hairy man.
Yeah. There's a like iconic Gambit pose, the kiss. You get him being like the playboy kissing on Jean Grey. I mean, it's all there. And then this is the one we're gonna draw. But to me, that's still one of my favorite. That's just such a Wolverine pose.
How many $billion of robots did they just destroy for their training session here?
Yeah, though they're all holograms.
Okay.
No, I don't know. They're outside and they have actual. they're like that Rogue. They're like, there's like a rocket launcher that comes out of the ground and shoots rockets at Rogue. It blows up part of the grounds there. And where's that at? Westchester, New York. X-Men.
It's a hell of a place to live. You're out there riding your golf cart around, and then there's some missiles flying out of the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? But I mean, crazy cool robots.
That image is its own justification right there. That's just quite. That would. I mean, seriously, that could be a Brunelleschi statue.
And it feels round like that, right? It feels so three-dimensional, and that's why no matter how much I don't understand what all this is and how cheap. Oh, good, this has those marks in it, so we can talk about them. It's just so present, and it's so big. Like this 11 by 17 piece of paper, this figure feels like
monumental.
He's huge. Yeah,
it feels monumental on the in the original printing on the little 6x10 or whatever.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I've never been able to figure that out, how to scrunch it.
Will you go back to that Wolverine panel? I know we're going to come back to that, but have you ever seen have you been to Italy before?
No, I've not, unfortunately.
Okay. If you ever go to Italy, go to Rome, and go to the museum that is in the park. I'm not going to remember the name of it at the moment, but get a chance to see the Brunelleschi's that are at this museum, and you can see Brunelleschi's statue of David. It's sort of a middle finger to Michelangelo's polite middle finger. Because Michelangelo's David has already done the action. He's just kind of standing there looking pretty. And Brunelleschi's David is right in the middle.
Yeah, he's pulling. We'll actually, let's pull that up. That's because that's a great. That's awesome.
That's what I saw. That's what I see right here when I look at that is coiled action.
Yeah.
All the best Jim Lee, to me, has that coiled action.
Yeah, and this is like when. Why do they got to go immediately to Michelangelo's?
Come on.
This is what Sean's talking about. A far better sculpture.
Wait, and when you see this in person, I mean, he just feels like he could just fling it at you at any second. It's difficult to capture it in a one-dimensional photograph. There you go. That's a little better.
Yeah.
It's coiled. It's like all the muscle groups are ready to engage, and it's not realistic in the sense of if you take a person and froze them in time, this is exactly what they look like. It's realistic in the sense that it feels like the motion that's about to occur. There you go.
There you go.
That's it right there.
And this is like if you're teaching, say, art appreciation, and you're talking about implied motion in a static form, this is like one of the pieces that you go to, right? Like you're totally covering the idea of the implied motion and all the tension, like the torque
Yeah.
that you can see in the flesh torquing
Yeah.
around as he rotates. Yeah, this is like, yeah, that's such a good call. That's perfect. That's a perfect read for that Wolverine.
Yeah, let's go back to the
Absolutely.
Wolverine and see him again.
Yeah.
We're gonna get to talk about it, but yeah, I love the way that the image is cropped too. You know, you don't have to see the rest of his arm to know that it's there. He obviously draws through the image, draws through the panel in a way that
Actually, I don't think he did. It doesn't make any sense. The bicep is like here, that hand's like way low and popping out. Like anatomically, it doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter. Like it's still. I mean, I think that image, and then this is Wolverine to me. And then
mm-hmm.
the image guys did so many of these short characters with the Wolverine hair, especially Liefeld. He did so many of these, but that's Wolverine to me. So it's always hard to buy Hugh Jackman. This is another one, that neck.
Yeah.
That Wolverine is just such a good Wolverine. And then it kind of all chills out for a little bit. You actually get some story, but then pretty quick back to now you've got your iconic Beast. It's still
Yes.
Wolverine because Wolverine's the best.
It's just crazy to me. The top of that panel is that Magneto at the very top.
This
Yeah, in the zoom out here, I mean, I can't see any of the lines, but there's clearly a gradation on the cheeks being created by the ticky tack hatching. It's really quite remarkable.
well, it's weird because they're taking basically like old wood engraving and like blowing that up. That's
Right.
kind of what the line work looks like. That real change in line weight from thin to thick, and blowing that up. I think part of that. Here's another good Beast. We're getting some iconic Beast moments and some iconic Gambit moments now. I think that was part of what they were looking at. It looks like old engravings, and I think they were also realizing that this stuff was going to shrink down, because I went, and another thing I scanned was that Wolverine in the issue to see how much loss of detail there was, and it's not bad.
No.
Look at that. That's that crotch shot Psylocke. But again, so iconic. Like I think they had that in that movie. They have a shot like that of her.
Would you believe that the first thing that I was ever paid to draw, someone in my 7th grade math class paid me $1 to draw Psylocke?
This one in specific?
It wasn't that specifically. I think it was probably something from one of the Adam Kubert issues.
Okay.
Somebody had something that they wanted a special drawing of, and I literally drew a picture of Psylocke in a towel.
Oh, that. I was so sad that page wasn't in here. She's like coming out of the water.
That's the one.
Yeah, they have the page before that in here. It's such a tease. And then you flip the page and she's coming out of the water, and Jean Grey's getting mad at Scott for looking at her. Right. That was one of my early sexual awakenings as well. I was like, oh, Psylocke coming out of the water. Oh my. Ooh. Yeah, so I was really disappointed they didn't have that, because that's another iconic image in my mind. And here you have some more. It's unfortunately the way we're doing this, we can't. If I zoom in, it's going to flip flop back and forth between whoever's talking. But there's some, you can see Jim Lee's blue lines, because I know he always draws in the blue line pencil.
Go ahead and zoom in, and I'll shut up.
Well, it's just there's 2 recording functions, and if we want if we want where we can see both of us, that's a setting I have to set, and it's forevermore.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But you get some of the blue line stuff. You can see his blue line drawings, which is cool. That's why you would want the color image. Some cool zip tone stuff. It's interesting to see, because I never really thought about these guys as using zip tone, but they do. Like there's another white zip tone here to lighten the background.
Mm-hmm.
There's blue in all the lettering, which is weird. I don't know if that's just how he lettered and they outlined it. Like maybe you can see that on the boom.
Yeah. I wonder who did if he wasn't responsible for the sound effects, he might have just given him a general indication in blue.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, like him penciling the letters. So that's a weird thing. But yeah, man, that first issue just like they knew the moment that they were in, and that's why this thing sold 6, 8 million copies, whatever it sold. Like, I mean, they knew they knew where they were at, and man, did they bring it home. Another iconic Magneto. I
Yeah,
used to
that's
call
another.
him I used to call him Magneto when I first read this, because you know what a magnet is, and you put an end on,
Right.
and I had to have someone years later correct me, so I went years calling him Magneto. He's got powers of magnets, so why wouldn't he be Magneto?
That's another grouping right there. That's definitely like late Renaissance sculptural grouping.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, the you get a lot of those sculptors that were influenced by the Roman copies of Greek stuff that were coming out of the ground at the time. Like the Laocoon grouping, which had been uh, dropped out of the ground while Michelangelo was working, and where the sculptural figures are referring to each other and interacting with each other in a way that is once again like fairly like stage like. I mean, that's just like this could almost be like a you know
well, and something else, maybe when we flip back to the screen share, we can look at the Laocoon. And another thing that's interesting about that comment you're making is it came out broken, and so they were kind of influenced by that. And then you get Rodin after Michelangelo. Rodin saw some of Michelangelo's unfinished pieces and was really fascinated with how the characters were emerging out of the rock,
right.
you know, how they were coming to life. And I do see some of that in here with like they're not complete. You know, if you have a sculpture in the round, you're going to go for a complete form, but here they're not complete, so it takes on that more of a vignette that you're talking
Yeah,
about, or like a diorama. And
right.
Rodin picked up on that, so I do see a lot. And you're talking about like power, you're talking about like Rodin too, so Rodin would be a sculptor that would be worth looking at. I don't know, we'll skip through the rest of this, because well, actually, let's find, this is a good, the opening to issue 2, and they've got zip tone in there, big zip tone.
Damn it, Carson! I'm envious of your book buying prowess.
Yeah, you got to get a copy, man.
I will do it.
Yeah, it's a good book, it's really good. There is that one, I don't know, I don't have it marked, but
Oh no,
there
when you go
is.
back to the crucifixion, this is not the first time that Wolverine's been pseudo crucified, but that's a particularly exciting one.
Let's find that. Well, I'll flip through real quick. We've got because I do want to find that page. Here's another
Yeah,
Magneto and Psylocke with their legs around someone's head. um, yeah, this book had kind of all the things I remembered. Oh, the basketball issue, I love that. I love that, was something that I really liked. I remember, and then the issue you're talking about doing the drawing out of, they were all out, the whole issues. That's the issue that introduced Bishop, right?
right.
And they're all out at the lake for the day. This is the crucifixion.
There it is.
This has some of those wacky lines I was talking about in it too, where it's like two lines next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
This is inked by Art T. Bear, and he was much more likely to do that trick than Williams, but Williams did it too. Um,
He did the whole. Did he ink the whole issue?
I
T
think he
Bear.
finished it technically,
Oh, okay.
like Jim Lee on plot and breakdowns,
Ah,
Scott
yeah.
Lobdell on dialogue, and Art
See,
T. Bear on finishes.
he was great. I don't know if he just couldn't make as much money doing his own work, but like he did the first couple issues of Cable. I thought were fantastic.
Art T. Bear.
Yeah,
He really does like nail the Jim Lee look. It's kind of an exaggeration of the Jim Lee look, but over top of Jim Lee, it works. It's not quite as good as Scott Williams, but it has that. He's kind of brings home the blade. You know,
right.
every like this hatching is so big,
Yeah, it's wild. I don't
but
even.
it's Blades. Everywhere is blades. Everything is dangerous. Oh, I tagged this page because this is one that was super fuzzy in the scan. We'll look at those in a second. I want to find that. Ghost Rider. That was cool. Well, I don't know where it's at, but they had the swimsuit day one that you were probably drawing. Yeah. That I love that. But then I had to tag just because I was going through the book and I'm like, oh my god, they didn't have any Omega Red stuff. That was the other part of that run that I just loved, was the Omega Red. And this cover, I remember being at a like Modesto Comic Con, which was like at some shitty local hotel, and I hadn't found the new issues of X-Men at the. I didn't know about comic shops yet. I was just going and getting them at the grocery store, like off the newsstand. And I hadn't seen. I don't think I had got this issue, and then I saw this issue like behind a dealer table at the Comic Con, and so that memory of that cover like up behind the dealer table, and I was like, Mom, Dad, I gotta have that. That's the new Jim Lee X-Men. And like, Omega Red was so cool. So that was another one I was really happy to see.
They're showing each other their teeth.
Yeah, and it's another one of those, like you talk about the Lacoon with the snakes winding through it, the serpents, and then the figures tangled up, and that kind of incomplete look of a Rodan, and just fitting characters that feel huge into a small space. That's another one. And then I didn't scan any of these, but when we were talking pre-show, you were talking about Jim Lee inking his own stuff.
Yeah.
And they do have in the back here some of the trading cards that he inked. And I actually find his inks kind of disappointing. I love these cards. And I mean, maybe it's just because he was drawing small for cards, but it's very obviously just like a tech pen. So that bladeness and the gradients that you're seeing, they're just not as sophisticated. It looks more like his pencils, I think. So it kind of gives you an idea of what Scott Williams brought to the table there in terms of an awareness of value, and an awareness of line weight and things like that. This is a great Sabretooth, though.
I was interested to see the first time I had seen his own inks was on the Deathblow stuff, and I just thought it was so much more visually dynamic. It just made me wonder why he wouldn't do that all the time. And it's like a totally different style. Obviously, he's working with a big brush, and is a lot more reliant on the extremes of the value spectrum. There's almost no gradation and things like that. But I don't know. It's just so different, I suppose. I mean, it wouldn't maybe pass muster in a superhero comic.
Well, and for that, he was aping Frank Miller. Like, he was doing Frank Miller's Sin City.
Who's doing Manara?
Milo Manara?
Yeah, I mean...
Frank Miller?
Yeah. Oh. Who's the Italian cartoonist who
Grubaugh.
Right.
We've been talking about him. We need to look at his books too, because when you look at Guido Crepa, it is Frank Miller. Like, those faces are so Frank Miller. Let's see if we can. Yeah, this is the sculpture you're talking about.
And once again, even though this is not a Renaissance image, this is more than 2,000 years old. Incredibly influential on the Renaissance sculptors and painters as well, and everybody copied this sculptural group. This was found in Italy during the Renaissance, in a lot of ways sparked the Renaissance, or at least propelled it, gave it some gasoline, if you want. There are masters who have copied this. I mean, dozens of master drawing copies of this when it first came out of the ground and was first reassembled. A lot of interesting arguments about how it was reassembled as well. But this was a grouping of sculptors who worked for the Roman, basically the Roman ruling class. Yeah, so here's the Michelangelo.
So these are Michelangelo's unfinished works. And Michelangelo also really exaggerated anatomy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like this, you get this just really, really buff guys. These weren't intended to stop like this. These were intended to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it was like Pope Pius the Third or something. He was hired to do for this guy's funerary. Um, I mean, basically where he was going to be buried, his tomb, and he did dozens of these, but he never finished it because the guy, I think the guy died, and there with the funding.
And they decommissioned it. But Rodin saw these and thought that they were like more beautiful unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
And so Rodin purposely brings that sense of unfinishedness into a lot of his sculptures where they're part of the rock. They emerge out of the rock. They're not so isolated. Which is the.
That's great. Beautiful. And you see the same mechanism happening with these artist editions, where people like to see the aspects of process. I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing monthly comics that are printed in color of people's black and white line art with a bunch of blue lines around it and everything.
That would be great. That's not a terrible idea. Set a trend right now. But
okay,
yeah,
well,
you get
chop this part out, okay? Because this is my business model for the next 10 years. So.
yeah, it's not a bad idea. I think people would eat it up. And I wonder if that's because so much stuff is going digital, that there's that, there's always going to be the pushback in the other way to the analog, where people want to see all of that.
You want to see the evidence of the hand, right? I mean,
yeah. But here's some of those Rodins that are intentionally unfinished. This is what he perceives as its finished state. And I see a lot of that in those Jim Lee pages too, where or even if you look at Rodin's Gates of Hell, the panel border acting as the framing device that's kind of structuring these things together, like keeping them together. Yeah, I wouldn't have made that call, but that was a great call on that. Okay, so talk about, well, I'm going to show some examples here of when I was looking at the book. So I scanned some images. When I was looking at the book, I did feel like it was fuzzy. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to look at this, and I wanted to get it in there and scan it. This page is pretty crisp. So we get up close on it, and like that black line,
yeah, it looks great.
Maintains pretty crisp. And then you get the obvious like dot tone pattern because it is printed with bin day dots still.
Yeah, that's how you generate a color image on a piece of paper. Is essentially you have 4 different color printer plates, and each one of those plates is contributing something to the finished image. And there are a few different methods they can use, but basically there's some type of very tiny mark that is all adding up to the illusion of a color image on a piece of paper. And unless you're developing your own photos in a lab or something, that is most of the color printing that you see in the world. But because you've got these 4 plates contributing, you can see the little registration issue there. So the magenta plate on this particular image is just slightly off.
This right here.
The others, yeah, you can see the little slight halo there.
Well, and you can see all through here, the yellow, the cyan, the magenta. I mean, all 3 of them are very, like the black is just offset from that.
Right. None of those are perfectly aligned. And that combined with fill-in, combined with the fineness of the dots, and combined with how they prepare the image, can all contribute to the feeling of softness to the eye. So basically, like when this illusion is perfect, somebody who doesn't know exactly what they're looking at can just look at a piece of paper and perceive the image that you want them to actually perceive. When it's the illusion is not perfect, what you're perceiving instead is this doesn't look quite right, or this looks soft, or why does that look funny?
You know what I think some of this is, though, Sean? I think this is just like there was a pencil mark there, and then this is the ink, and so those colors are representing the pencil. No, so it's not as misaligned. Yeah, that's a pencil mark.
No, just the only one that looked misaligned to me was the magenta. You can see
Magenta.
the
Okay.
magenta peeking over behind the black a little bit. But yeah, I mean, this looks like an excellent reproduction. Once again, you're not perceiving this probably to your naked eye unless you have a jeweler's loop stuck up against your naked eye.
Yeah, so this one I felt I scanned this one as a pretty good example. Now, this one I scanned, and this is cool. I love these issues with, I think this guy's name was Maverick. This was the Weapon X Omega Red stuff. This one looked fuzzy to me.
Wow, those are wild lines on his nose area there. Interesting marks there. Yeah.
Yeah, actually I should look for some of those marks I'm talking about too. I love that though. That's metal.
That's wild. Yeah.
Um,
and the zigzag knives within knives. Look at that.
Yeah, it's like that's what I'm talking about. It's like a mark this way, and then a mark this way, and then a mark this way, and then they kind of do this. I don't. It's very strange to me. But this one, I felt like, man, if you look at these lines, there is no edge of this line. It just kind of blurs out into this dot pattern.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the issue here. So Carson was saying that this book is printed on the inside on uncoated paper, or at least matte coated paper. You said it doesn't look coated to you at all, or doesn't feel coated at all.
It's not shiny. It does feel pretty smooth. It's not very rough, so it could be coated with the matte coating.
Okay. Well, so the reason that coated paper came up in the first place and that was developed is because you can get a fine impression with very limited amount of ink bleed, and you really don't have to push the ink very well. So the coating is actually a clay mixture that is spread over the surface of the paper pulp during the curing process, and it makes the surface of the paper smooth enough that the ink sits on top of it. And when you're printing with a smooth thing, basically you get a harder, cleaner impression. And you're printing on something that's rougher, you have to work a lot harder to get a clean impression on that. And so at least the modern technique for that is something called output sharpening. And what sharpening is a process. You could actually do sharpening prior to the computer age as well. And basically, prior to the computer age, what you do is you make a blurry version, a blurry copy of something. And
so like this is pretty blurry.
and you align it with the other copy of it, and you can photographically make a sharper version of that thing as a combination of those two images. And digitally, this is a very easy thing to do with Photoshop's Unsharp Mask tool. And so, Carson, if you would bring up the dot field right there. So here's a close up of printer dots. This is way up close of a print that was part of a Cerebus archive campaign. At some point, it was a color painting. And this is a very, very small portion of that. It was printed digitally. And you can see the dot tone pattern. In this case, the image is only made up of the magenta plate and the yellow plate. And that's almost and a little bit of black plate. And that's basically the entire contents of that image right there.
And that's from this?
Yeah, it is. It's in the background of, this is just they're both small samples of the same image. So that's like in the background of another part of the image. And then, so go back to that one now, if you would. So this is another portion of that same image. And this is actually the raw scan. And if you can see, it's actually pretty soft. Will you zoom in just a little bit more of that?
Yeah, we're at 200% now. So you're going to get a little bit of pixelization, but.
So you can see how soft the scan actually was. So, if you were actually able to look at this thing in person, this is clearly not what it would look like. But what happened is this was scanned on a scanner that doesn't have, either at a resolution that wasn't high enough or with the scanner element not high enough to actually resolve any of the information. That means that the information itself is getting softened by the process of scanning it. And so this is just basically...
So that's saying like the camera was a little too far away and it's getting like some atmospheric blur almost.
Well, yeah, it wasn't done with the camera. It was done with the desktop scanner. But all scanners are not created equal. So the
But
camera,
like the scanning unit that's going through
yes,
is a little too far away, and so you're getting like
or fuzzy.
the light being reflected through the glass is causing more of a issue.
That's part of it too. But also the scanning element on this particular scanner itself. I mean, this wasn't scanned by me. This was scanned, on some prosumer scanner, somebody's desktop thing, and the unit itself is like essentially like a little camera, and it just was soft. It's a soft image. So getting this image and knowing I was going to have to print it, I was able to test this on a couple different devices, and basically I wanted to see, like, can you sharpen too much? Like, what is too much for sharpening? And here's the actual end product of this particular scan. I just sharpened the bejesus out of it. This is 2 passes of sharpening. This was really like an exploratory thing. I wanted to see, like, what is too much. Now this is way into the image. This is a tiny little portion of the image. It's something like an inch tall or an inch and a half tall. But you can see I did 2 passes on this really soft scan, trying to get it sharp enough that it was going to really look sharp in print. One of the passes, I made the threshold. In fact, are you in Photoshop right now? Let's just go ahead and do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So we'll do
So
it to this image.
yeah. So go up to Filter and Sharpen menu, and then go to Unsharp Mask. So I did this in 2 passes, and one of them, I brought the threshold way down. So make the threshold like 10 or something like that.
10%.
10 is the threshold is the bottom one.
Yeah.
The threshold is like basically how much is this going to affect it? Like which portion of the image is it going to affect? If you bring the
And
threshold
then what do you
way
want
up,
on the amount?
pretty high.
Oh, there we go.
So our radius right now is really high. So bring the radius down to about 1 pixel. Let's try that. Okay. Bring the radius higher again.
Oops. So I got it at 1 pixel, threshold at 10, and then amount.
Bring the radius up to like maybe 2, a little bit more than that. So this is okay, now bring the threshold down even more. So we're going to
5.
Something like that. Yeah, there we go. So now this is basically affecting everything with a low amount of sharpening. If you take that higher, you can see it starts to get kind of grainy. You're picking up a lot of surface there. Now this is such a soft image. We're probably going to end up, so let's do the amount at like 150, something like that. Okay, go ahead and hit okay for that. So that's our first pass. This is just basically like sharpening the surface of the thing, trying to get a little bit more grit out of it, what it actually looked like. Now let's do a mega blast here, and we'll for this one we'll back off the.
You want to go back to the unsharp mask?
Yeah, please.
Okay. This is actually a good way to do an instructional video because you have to talk through it.
Right. And for this one, let's move the radius up.
To where do you want it?
Yeah, like 4, something like that. And this one, we're going to target this at the line art itself. So move the threshold up this time. So now the threshold is going to move up, so it's affecting less of the image. So yeah, about right there. Good.
75. Okay. We'll put it at 75.
Looks good. 74. And now make the amount go up higher. So now basically what we're doing is we're targeting the line art. We're moving the threshold so that it's only grabbing the areas that are already high contrast. And the amount still, not too much. And the radius is higher because we want this effect to have a wider halo to it. Now, if you hit OK, that's probably going to be very comparable to what we already had.
We went a little bit overboard on the whites, basically. Like there's a white glow around things, but
yeah, well, maybe. But how does it compare to the sharp version? It looks about the same, right?
This has less of that white
okay.
stuff.
A little bit less haloing. Okay. Anyway, so now let's take a look at what it actually looks like when it was in print.
Well, and I want to compare this. Like, let's just pop back real quick to And I'm assuming a lot of the images in the X-Men book, they scanned it and then just printed it straight from this
Yeah,
without any of the adjustment, right? That's
right.
why we're getting these blurry images. So they didn't take the time to do this.
Well, and a lot of people don't know about it. And the other thing is, it looks fairly scary on screen.
It does. It does. It looks like garbage on screen.
Because we're zoomed in way too close. I mean, that's the whole point of getting in close like that. But then let's take a look at what it actually looks like when it's coming through the one that says Chico scan
Yeah.
dot. Um, so after it's actually been through the process of being printed, you can see it looks like a normal image. In fact, I mean, it basically just looks like it was printed. You have retained that extra bit of crispiness that you made with the sharpening has retained all of the detail through the print process, which is actually a fairly remarkable kind of thing. And I wish I could go to your living room right now or wherever you're watching this video and give you a print so you could take a look in person. But basically, in order to make something sharp on uncoated paper, you have to scan it or treat it after you scanned it in a way that makes it look a little bit scary.
When you're zoomed in.
Right, when you're zoomed in.
Because when I zoom out on this,
yeah, looks great.
It looks great.
Absolutely great.
So that's what's happening, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk about this book, because when we're printing those original art where you're trying to capture all the color for the people who are trying to, like, reverse engineer the techniques, which is the whole point of an artist edition, you got to do it in color, but then you can't have the crispness of line that you've seen in our other videos.
Right.
Because it's not just straight to a plate, it's in this dot process.
That's right.
And I found throughout this book that there was images, and so I'm assuming then, Sean, like, this is the cover, and you're speculating that no, this is still a dot pattern too.
Yeah, it's a dot pattern too, but
it's way crisper though.
Way crisper, but it was the cover, so somebody knew it was going to be the cover, so it's possible that somebody has manually adjusted this one in a useful manner. And number B, this is printed on coated stock, and so you've already got a crisper impression just from the way that it was actually printed. So the coated stock, because the ink, the plate has to have less pressure, there's less absorption, there's less direction for the ink to move and go. I mean, it just doesn't move. It's printed on there, and the smooth paper surface retains the ink on top of it, and so you have to have a lot less treatment to get a sharp image. And so, there's a couple different reasons that could have been, but yeah, I'm guessing that a lot of the variation in terms of how sharp these things were or weren't in the printing has to do exactly with where they were sourced from and if they were scanned. How they were scanned. That's the thing about scanning too, is just because a scanner is shitty doesn't mean that the image that comes out of it is going to be soft. A lot of scanners, in fact, build in a lot of sharpening routines now, which is a total pain if you're working with line art, and you don't want everything sharpened all the time necessarily. But if you take something down to your local FedEx or something and you ask them to scan it on their big Xerox machine, it actually applies sharpening unless you specifically tell it not to. So it's possible that the artwork for this book, that a lot of them were scanned by the owners in some random place, and it happened to be output sharpened as it was coming off of the scanner.
And then just not readjusted afterwards. Yeah, like you can see it really bad in this page. And this page has that dot tone. So I think some of the reason that dot tone looks so dark to you is just because it's totally bled. Like the dots just bleed one into the other, like they just gradate into that yellow in between, but there's no definition on the edge of those dots. So that was another one where I noticed, man, these are really, really fuzzy. Now this one where it scanned this white and you can see those yellows that I was talking about. That one has like a much crispier look to it. And it's also interesting just how black and white it printed. There's that red that they were dropping out that we were talking about.
Well, and since there's less of the paper patina, uh, it's more reliant on the black plate of the printing process as well. So it's also just by definition going to be sharper.
Yeah, and then this one has, okay, this has some of these weird inking solutions.
That's so interesting.
Like this mark right here, like he's drawing a P. Like, see, that's like it's a sword. Like he's drawing a sword. Or there's like this little seed motion that they're making, and then they bother to come in and put like a tick mark next to it, and then another. Like, I know it's building up value, but at the same time, like, why are there these gaps? Like, what is that accounting for in the building of value? Or this like mountain pattern here? I don't know. I just find there's still the one type of mark I'm really looking for is not in
What?
this one. I don't.
And that one, the broken, almost like they started with a broken line across, across the line that was already drawn in there, and then started doing the inward hatching.
Yeah,
You,
like this, right?
yeah. Do you see that the broken line underneath that? Like some of that, like
This.
key. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder, like, why isn't that just a line and then you
Yeah.
do
Right.
this, and like what is the problem solve? So it's like you do that and then you do this and then you come back and you do this. And like it works. It
Yeah.
looks cool, but as a solution, I don't know how you come up with that. Like what are you trying to achieve? That's not something that it's just like, oh well, that's just what his hand does. Like
Right.
here you have two lines next to each other and then you go like this on top of them. Like I can kind of see how you come to that. But this is like so pre-planned out. It's not like, well, my hand just has a little bit of a loop at the end of it when I make a
Right.
mark. It's okay, I do this and then I do this and then I do this and then I do that. So I'm just absolutely fascinated. And then they create these like lace
Yeah.
effects where it's like these blades going into blades, which you would think you would want to extend the line a little bit so that you integrate the area more. You don't make it look like all these separate interlocking shapes, like they do up here. That
Right.
creates the gradient a little bit better. But there's a lot of these where it's like a lacing effect
But
that
look,
I
and
find very bizarre.
if you look at the hatching on the thigh again, or on the quadricep, um, it, it had to have been turned around while it's working too. So this is not, like you were saying, these are not just like characteristic lines. Look at the way that the line is tapered. You have a set going to the right and a set going to the left, and
Oh,
they're
like
facing each other with the
here
taper. Yeah,
and
so
here.
very unlikely that those were drawn in one position, or inked in one position. He's gone through and reversed his position. So you can do it.
Yeah, yeah, you can do it. But I've seen videos of him inking. Yeah, these guys spin their papers all around. I've gotten to where I can do it both ways because of, like we've talked about in previous videos. It's nice to keep the image stable.
Right.
Um, oh, and here, like, you get this weird little, like, you know these
Mm-hmm.
little dealies here. Like, this stuff makes sense to me. It's creating value. It's an extrapolation of old engraving techniques. I wonder if they were seen, like, in engraving. I wonder if there just happens to be marks like this that they were picking up on and extra stylizing. This is cool. All of the buildings reflecting
Uh-huh.
in her glasses. um
Gradation in
yeah,
the
and
mouth, directing you down the throat.
yeah. Uh, and these little ones make sense to me, kind of. They're just trying to, like, you didn't want to fill it in because that's too dark, so you're knocking the value down by putting two lines next to each other. That all kind of makes sense to me. But okay, here's the ones I'm talking about. These ones. This is another. By the way, this is a ridiculously blurry image. Another thing I found interesting on these blurry ones is you can see the bend A pattern, and
Right.
you can see the circles and you can see the color more. So the blacks are they're much more blown out, and
Right.
like that's not even a black line anymore. Um, but then yeah, this page also. I think this is one of those Art T Bear inks. So he's the one that's most guilty of this weird, but this effect here. So
Hmm.
down to there, and then like put a handle on the blade. down to there, put a handle on the blade, down to there. Like, I don't know what that is, and that shows up all over faces. I mean, I guess it's making it a little bit darker here,
Uh-huh.
but I don't know why you wouldn't just have the line weight. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't just do that.
Is there
I
a
mean,
writing reason that that Gambit doesn't have pupils? Is it because he's
yeah,
Asian?
I think it's
You
the
lose them?
energy. I think it's the energy in his eyes because you can see there's like the kind of the little crackle effect.
Okay.
I think he has like energy eyes. Yeah. Um,
I don't know if it was like a New Orleans brass band thing or.
no, I don't think so. Here, that mark makes sense to me because
Yeah.
it's showing two edges, like an edge here and an edge here. But like, what edge are they representing
Yeah.
here? I get that it's a value thing, but it's so weird. Like it doesn't bother me. Like, I still like this stuff.
Well, it's just like
Um,
its face is made of metal. I mean, it's the lines are not unlike some of the other.
well, everything's made out of metal. It looks like there's. It doesn't matter
Oh,
what they're drawing either. It has that. The only time you get texture is they get obsessive about Wolverine's hair,
right.
and then there's these beautiful gray tones that go in with hair.
Yeah.
Um, but this image has all of that. This is Scott Williams, and you get a more sophisticated version than the Art T Bear of these piling. But I mean, when you get up in there, it's really is like there's that dashed line again,
Yeah.
and then you do this, and then you do this, and it's such a bizarre solution. And this has like this is there it is again, like putting those marks next to each other within the hatching. I really like this where it's like a tick mark and a tick mark. It's like a double tick mark to kind of soften that edge up. So there's some of them where it makes sense to me what he's doing, but then some of it just it's so bizarre. So the only thing I could come up with is making everything look metal and making everything look like sharp and dangerous.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like a universe of speed lines. Although the broken glass thing is also, um, an appealing
Yes,
explanation to me.
yeah, speed lines is a good one too. And then this is I isolated out so you could see throughout the book some of the inconsistencies just through the different pages we looked at. These are
It's a lot
all,
of variation. Yeah.
yeah, really crispy ones, really blown out ones. And I try to get marks that are about the same size. These are all like nabbed at 100% from that 1200 DPI. This is probably from the cover. So I noticed that while I was looking at the book. And I just feel like with an artist edition, especially, that you're paying $150 for. I get that they're getting images from different sources. I
Right.
feel like you kind of
Hugely
owe it.
variable. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of owe it to find out about like the stuff that you're talking about with the sharpening to go in there and try and recover it to
Right.
that sharpness of an original ink line. Um, I don't know. I just like if I'm paying that much money,
Uh-huh.
especially because the reason I'm buying those as an artist is for that kind of fetishistic, uh, like how they done it, like learning process,
Right.
and that means that someone is looking at the book with hawkish eyes already. They're ultra zooming in
Right.
at a ridiculous level. So of course I'm going to notice that more than say, and if I just pick up a book. I was also interested in how well this stuff reproduced. Because we're always
Interesting.
talking about how it produces in the comic, how much it fills in and stuff. And I was surprised to see that it's pretty good. Like, I mean, you look at the hair, which are some of the smaller marks.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's interesting the gradation that's created on the original artwork on Professor X's suit jacket or whatever that he's wearing is mostly eliminated in the photography stage.
yeah, which
Uh,
I think was, they're converting it to black and white. They're
yeah,
not going to capture those grays.
right. That's a tough order for that era's photography without some outside assistance of you know. But yeah, it looks pretty good. It looks like most of that is retained, and that's the thing is that I mean that really is drawn for reproduction. You can see
Yeah,
some fill in on his professor's cheeks and ear.
and some in the knuckles on
Mm-hmm.
Wolverine, and these things black out. But that could also be because there's blue all throughout there. So I do see some of the what would be white, but that's mostly just the color filling it in. So it is impressive, I think, how well it reproduces. And then something else is looking at these. This is a 1200 dot per inch scan of the actual comic book. So
Right.
this is printed way smaller. Those scans that I was showing of the art, those are printed at 11 by 17, which is the
Yeah.
original artboard size. This is printed at comic book size, so what, more like 6 by 9?
Yeah. And you
And
can
look
get
at
it.
the fidelity of the lines there. Like
Yeah.
those are perfect crispy lines.
Well, I mean, that's a black and white reproduction for you. And if you did it today and you did it the correct way, I mean, you could get something that's basically the, spitting image of the original lines. But that would be dependent on the printer doing a good job, you doing a good job doing the setup and everything. But yeah, there's something to be said for line art, and communicating the intent of the artist, the
So
hand of the artist.
you're saying that what happened here was because the black plate was a separate plate.
Yes.
It was a
This
separate plate, and they were able to reproduce, and then the colors were printed in this dot tone pattern.
you got
So,
it. So
so
this was when artwork like this would have been produced at the time. The original artwork would have been shot on a giant stat camera that was as big as the largest room in your house, and that black plate would have been used to generate proofs and approval and everything, and then somebody would have colored on a stat of that and basically indicated all of the different colors that were going to be happening and how those colors were going to be created. So maybe you indicate a magenta at 10%, and you can have those different screens overlap each other in different ways to create different kinds of effects. And you can see some of that happening right here.
yeah, you can see that perfectly here. I mean, here it's got all three colors. This has just got yellow and magenta. This has got all three.
Right.
But
And because
would they have black also in this, or would the black be
well,
exclusively preserved
it,
for that?
it depends on the house style and the instructions that they were given from down on high. So apparently, using shades of black was forbidden at a lot of the bigger publishers, basically because the printers would push the black plate sometimes to make sure that they get a nice rich black. And if you push the black plate and your colors are all reliant on having different values of black added in there, it starts muddying up everything as the printer is pushing the black to try to get a nice crisp black, or I mean a nice rich black.
Yeah.
So it
So
depends on the era. Um,
so let me ask you then, would these artist edition benefit from a black plate for the line work, like go through and adjust it, or would that be losing too much of the brushiness of the
yeah,
color of the art?
I don't think that would look as I don't think that would look the way that people have grown accustomed to them looking. I mean, because basically you don't get any nuance to the black. I mean, a lot of the things that like people talk about is, oh, I can see the yeah. I mean, like the wateriness of the inks and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
I think what would be what the biggest things that people could do is just being really sensitive to the how soft or sharp are my scans and making sure that the output stage is sharpened appropriately for the paper that they're using, for the type of printer that they're using, things like that.
And
But
then going back and doing the sharpening process and learning, okay, on this
manually,
paper I need to sharpen this much.
that's right. And
Okay.
programs like Lightroom is an Adobe program that's actually incorporated automatic output sharpening. Because the guy who designed Lightroom was a fascinating guy who's really interested in color photography and reproduction, and he designed a bunch of sharpening algorithms for Adobe before he died. And Lightroom actually automatically incorporates those. You can turn them on and off and say what type of paper you're planning on printing on. I don't think it's quite as aggressive as you might use. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to handle stuff like that. But yeah, to me, I really love seeing, fantastically reproduced stuff as line art. And I'm a little bit less interested in the color reproductions, except for, like you're saying, to just sort of figure out what it is that's going on. But, you see so little good black and white line art reproduction these days. Maybe it's best if we just people leave it alone for a while.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, like I would have been bummed out if I bought this Jim Lee book and it was all perfectly adjusted, like black and white only,
right.
because I do want, like, I picked up, I don't have it, I don't have enough money to grab it right now, but I would like to get it and talk about it eventually, is the Watchmen
Hmm.
artist edition. And there's very clear indications in there of where Dave Gibbons was using whiteout purposely to separate the figures from the background. It's very consistent in there. And it's something that you would think if you saw it in black and white, where he was just stopping his line short of the figure on purpose. But then when you see it in color and you can pick up where the whiteout is and stuff, then you see that he was actually so intentional about it that he would go back and white out these little halos around the figures. So you lose some of that process and thought process in the black and white. So as someone who's trying to, yeah, have that archaeological evidence of
Right.
the color print, I think I think there's two different things. There's a lot of like what we would look at as like a readable book, where I want to see Jim Lee in black and white, and maybe
Right.
you do like a 8 by 12 book in black and white that's like a readable version with nicely adjusted black and white art. And then there's the artist, so that would be like a deluxe edition, right? Like a black and white deluxe edition. And
Hmm.
DC was doing some of those. Like I've got one of Tim Sale's Batman stuff that's black and white. It's not an artist edition, but it's stripped all the color out. And then you have the big artist edition, which is like at size.
Right.
So it would be cool if that's, yeah, because I think you're more interested in just like the readable black and white, crispy image version of things. And there's audiences for both, for sure.
Oh yeah, and maybe the good guideline for these kinds of books would be to go for the coated paper.
Yeah, for the reproduce the artist
Yeah, for
books.
the color reproduction. Yeah,
Okay.
it's hard to beat it. But I mean, there are also papers that have extremely high smoothness that are uncoated as well. If people like that tactile feel, but they're a lot more expensive these days. Printer or you know coated papers are actually competitive with uncoated papers now because of all the price increases.
I think that's part of it, right? Is like we were talking about with the Strange Death, you want, like me and Dave both want the non-coated paper because it feels like the paper that we drew on.
Yeah.
This artist book definitely doesn't have this feel. I think it's a matte coated paper.
Okay.
It's not super glossy though.
Yeah.
I don't know enough to tell, but it definitely doesn't have that rough feeling of an actual paper.
Well,
So
so what do you say we turn into 10-year-olds again and do our best Scott Williams Jim Lee imitation?
yeah, we'll take a break. Before we take a break, let's remind our viewers that we have our own book, and we brought Sean's expertise in black and white reproduction to the table to make a beautiful volume. The Strange Death of Alex Raymond by Dave Sim and myself. This is coming out in into July, early August from your local comic store. This is, you can order it through previews. You can get on Amazon. Pop down to your local comic shop and pick it up. It's in black and white on non-coated paper, but there's no color involved. So you just get these beautiful, beautiful line work reproductions that Sean's produced of Dave and mine's art.
It's a heck of a book, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. It's been quite the journey, and we're happy to get it into your hands. So
Yeah. All right. Let's go trace.
sounds good.
Okay. So I'm gonna end the meeting and then
Great.
send you another one so we
Yeah.
can get a separate recording.
Give me 5 minutes, okay?
Yeah, cool.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
man. That was great.
Yeah, that was a good one. That I was really interested in that because when I was looking at, I got the Frank Miller Ronin one too, and the Al Williamson ones,
Ooh.
and that Frank Miller Ronin one was so fucking fuzzy. I was
Uh,
like, ugh. But we'll look at those eventually too.
yeah, that was a good talk. Nice work.
Yeah, Thank
All
you,
right.
sir. I'll see you in a few.
Okay, bye.